Welcome everybody to Metaverse Interviews. Meet with Cheese, people and projects you need to know about. I am your host, LeDrop WithCheese, coming to you from the Metaverse as always. Today I have an outstanding guest for you, someone that I met during Quantum Miami Week. He is the founder and CEO of CoinStructive since 2015. I present to you Chris Groshong. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Hey, LeDrop, thanks for being here. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I'm really glad that I recorded and got to hear your story about a fraud case that you were working out that ended up being a successful track down, which everyone can watch on my channel. It's called Metaverse Stories. Yours is the first one that I posted.
Cool.
And what you do so fascinating, and I think people need to know about what you've been doing for almost 8 years now. In the cryptocurrency world and blockchain fraud. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up to where you are today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure getting to meet you, and I'm at the Quantum Miami conference. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. And so originally, yes, CoinStructive has been around since 2015, but we've pivoted several times since then. But we have been doing this. The mission was always to help people, and so initially we were doing more things on education, but people like free education, and a lot of education should be for free. So my model didn't really work out that great, but everything that I did kind of led up to where we are today. And so how do you become a crypto fraud investigator, right? It was kind of happenstance, to be honest. Being in the right place at the right time and kind of building things in the direction that I was going. So to be more specific, I was in, I guess it was 2018. Everything had just fallen apart. The industry, it was tanking again, kind of very similar to where we are now, entering another full-blown crypto winter. And so the business model wasn't working. So I decided to go back to doing education, but I wanted to be more targeted, more focused. And so I started to do, because in 2017, I became a Bitcoin ATM founder with 3 other people. And we started a company in Southern California, and I became the compliance officer. And I took that risk because I knew other people in the space with the knowledge that could help me do the job. And so I was like, okay, well, this is something that has to be done. I'll do it. And little did I know that it would turn out to be something that I would turn into an actual business itself. So one of the things that we do is compliance department as a service. There's a lot of crypto companies out there and people who want to start smaller companies who want to sell crypto. Even if you're just on, let's say, you used to be able to be on local Bitcoins, but the platforms where you can do a lot of peer-to-peer trading, right? In the US, you can get yourself into quite a bit of trouble if you're not registered as a money service business with the organization FinCEN through the Treasury Department. And they want to just know you don't necessarily need a license, but you have to be registered that you're selling crypto, essentially. And if you don't, you can basically be charged with money laundering and go to prison. And there were 2 gentlemen in San Diego who that happened to. And I've interviewed them since they got out, and we did it at our conference, our Web3 conference, Web3 SD, San Diego conference that we did last year. And that was really eye-opening for a lot of people because people haven't heard the actual stories from folks that have gone to prison because of selling crypto. And when you actually hear somebody who spent time in prison, it kind of makes you take a step back because you don't think that that's ever going to happen to you, or you can't no one's going to look at me, I'm the small guy, right? It's the same concept as, well, I'm a good driver and I only had 2 drinks, I'm only going down the block. And then somebody hits you and now you get drunk driving, even though you weren't doing anything wrong in the car except for being drunk, right? It's this being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that kind of a situation can really backfire on you, especially in this industry, especially on the financial regulatory side of things. All right, so then how does that lead to compliance, or how does that lead to investigations, you might wonder? Okay, so because I was I was mentioning that it goes back to education, right? Well, I got involved with an organization here in California, and it's made up of law enforcement and banking compliance professionals. And I was their go-to crypto guy. And I started speaking at their conferences every year. And excuse me. And basically what happened was they started relying on me for all of their crypto information. And I kind of was leaning on them for a lot of the regulatory and kind of compliance related stuff. And then what I realized was there was a huge gap. And so they started asking for training. So then I started to build some trainings, and I started to connect with partners in this space to help me provide a more substantial training, such as getting partnerships with blockchain forensics companies who could allow me the ability to actually train law enforcement on what is a crypto investigation, how does it look, what are the components, what do I do after I've found where the money's gone. And so we run into this issue that there's not a lot of companies out there that are able to help folks with this type of expertise or knowledge. And so the law enforcement folks, until recently, have really kind of been left out in the cold, a lot of them. So that was kind of one of the things that we started to do, was train law enforcement, lawyers, and banking compliance professionals. And in building those relationships with the blockchain forensics companies, they in turn started referring victims to us, which I was kind of unsuspecting, or I wasn't expecting it. And then I turned it into a business model, because I figured, hey, instead of just telling everybody that, hey, your crypto's gone and you're probably not going to get it back, in some situations, there are cases where the funds are sitting on an exchange, can be frozen and seized and returned to the victim. So I decided it wasn't all about just telling people, no, sorry. Let's do a little bit of an investigation and figure out whether or not it's even worth, the time and the energy to go after it. And I started to do that. That was like early 2019. Next thing you know, I was getting more referrals. I met some people that found out that I was doing that kind of work. And then all of a sudden I was getting all kinds of work. So I started to expand the services. Now, since then, a lot of companies have gotten into the space. Excuse me. There's a lot more competition. There's a lot of people that are out there thinking that they're just going to make money off of victims. And I can kind of tell you that that's not my mission. And in actuality, I pretty much run the whole department as a nonprofit, and the other departments actually are kind of where we make our money. But I'm actually thinking about spinning out the whole investigations department as a nonprofit altogether. I just think it makes more sense, because the goal is to help victims. It's not here to make money off of victims. It's to help them get their money back. And if you're a nonprofit, I mean, at least that the company's doing it for supposedly the right reasons, and that, hey, you also, everything that you pay to that nonprofit is a tax write-off. So it's double benefit. You're helping yourself and you get the tax benefit. So I felt like that trustworthiness of a nonprofit on the investigation side would be a really beneficial thing to gain trust. So that's kind of one of the things that we're looking forward to do in the future. But investigations is one of the things that really makes me feel good at the end of the day, when you're helping people. Even if you can't always help them exactly the way you'd like, at least they're not going to go out and get scammed again.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there. The doing it as a non-for-profit should be the precedent that you set for the industry, because everyone's trying to make a quick buck in Web3 because it's novel and people don't fully comprehend it. And you guys having the experience that you do and working with law enforcement and being a non-for-profit, I just see as a great way to operate and have, build that trust within the community of members you're going to be ultimately helping, and that will all be referring people that are victims to you. So I really appreciate what you do in the space, and keep going, and you kind of mentioned there's 3 different parts to your business. So crypto fraud investigations, and then the compliance as a service, right? And then there's one other option.
Yeah, and so there is one other part, which is the money transmitter licensing. Excuse me. So the money transmitter licensing came about organically because, initially, most people look to, when they need money transmitter licensing, they're looking to attorneys, and that's how the industry's kind of always been. And that's just a job that attorneys have done and provided those services forever. And so I started to kind of realize that it doesn't necessarily need to be done by an attorney. And so when a compliance client comes and says, hey, we're thinking about expanding into such and such state, or they're in a state and, hey, I've just been informed that the laws are changing, or I'll tell a customer or a client, hey, that state you were thinking about going into, they just changed the laws, and now you would need a license, which means you'd have to go through this whole rigmarole. And it's it's an administratively intensive task, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's timelines and deadlines, but it's nothing that a good project manager can't manage. Now, getting actual legal opinions on whether or not your business model, right, applies in a certain state where you need to get a license, sure, maybe you should contact an attorney to get a legal opinion. But you don't need to hire the attorneys necessarily to do all the work, right? Because they're going to charge you attorney rates to do administrative work. So when our clients would come to us directly and saying, hey, we need a license in this state, can you help us? Thinking that compliance and money transmitter licensing, kind of the regulatory affairs, is kind of, they go hand in hand. They're not synonymous, but they're very closely related. It's kind of like sales and marketing are hand in hand, right? But they're not the same, because you talk to a salesperson and they'll be like, oh yeah, no, it's definitely not marketing. And you talk to a marketing person, they're like, oh, it's definitely not sales. But without them, right, neither one of them can really function at their peak performance. And so it's kind of similar. You can't really do compliance without having regulatory affairs, but they're not the same. So our goal is to help folks in smaller companies be able to achieve those aspirations of being a bigger company, and what bigger companies aspire to have, which are those money transmitter licenses in the states that they need them. Or you get responses from the states that you don't need, so you can proceed to do the activities that you want. So like if you want to sell Bitcoin, you can sell Bitcoin, and then you can do that in a lot of states depending on your business model without a license. But like even Texas, you can do it. But as soon as you want to sell like stable coins in Texas, now you need a license. Right? It's a very nuanced component of their money transmitter licensing aspect. But if you just want to sell Bitcoin, you don't need it. So it's knowing all the nuances of 50 states, because they're basically like 50 countries when it comes to these things. And so that's why we hire from the local law school here in San Diego, where I'm based. And look for people who have that desire to be in the crypto industry, but also want to utilize their degree, right? Whether or not they actually become full-fledged attorneys and pass the bar, or if they just have a JD, you can be in the legal field and be in a cutting-edge environment at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. That's great that you're doing that. And yes, the 50 states are like 50 countries in so many ways, not just the ones that we are discussing. But yeah, it's just a wild time to be involved in, I can imagine, law enforcement and the blockchain, and learning this whole new technology one step at a time. But as far as like your vision and definition of the metaverse, like what is the metaverse to you and where do you see it affecting humanity in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I believe that the technologies, I believe that the technologies that we're currently embracing and learning to use are generational, meaning, right, grandma and grandpa are not going to be the ones that are going to be in the metaverse, so to speak. So to me, the metaverse is a hybrid of, our day-to-day IRL versus our online presence. And it's those two things are going to start to blend. And that's what the metaverse is. It's, you need a real world functioning device to be able to send crypto. To buy something in a 3D environment that you put a VR helmet on and experience. So it's the conduit or it's I don't know, it's not a tool, but it's like the ways to the means, right? It is an evolutionary step, and we're kind of in this in-between mode. And that's, to me, right now, the metaverse will be that it'll be the combination of both real world and virtual.
Yes, and not knowing when you're in either at times. Well,
yeah, or being in both at the same time.
Yes, for sure. I agree. I like that definition, and I see it, I'm hearing that more often from, the academia writers in Web3, that we're not going to notice when we're in the metaverse or real life at times. And that's kind of where we're headed down the road. And it's exciting to see, because it's blockchain means freedom for every individual out there to follow their passion and use all the skills they've had in their life to do what they want to do in Web3 and reinvent themselves, is what we're seeing all the time, which is exciting.
I look at all these adaptations of technologies like as enhancements for humans. Excuse me, I've been dealing with allergies it's been dry and windy, and we've getting a lot of bloom out here in the desert. So, but I really see it as this extension of like what human thought has turned into actual do actionable items. And so we have this experience that's happening around us all the time, and we need additional ways to interact and enhance our environment to keep up with all those things. So I feel like this is just a natural extension of the direction that we're going.
Yes, for sure. And I got to hear one of your stories about crypto fraud investigation you were working on, but do you have one that you want to tell the audience about? Something interesting you've worked on?
Oh yeah. Let me see if I can think of a good one. There are some good ones. I don't know. You know what? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna talk about a particular style of fraud case, and because a lot of the victims are the same and the situations are very much the same. But the background behind it is really cool. So some people are familiar with what's called a SIM swap. And a SIM swap is when your phone gets ported to another service provider without your knowledge. And this has been something that's been happening for quite a while in the space. It's happened to some really big name people. People have lost tens, 20s, 30s of millions of dollars in assets because of SIM swaps. And the most egregious violators of this are T-Mobile. They have the largest percentage of victims, which is interesting because they also spend the most on advertising. If you notice that it always seems to be like there's some celebrity promoting a T-Mobile commercial, and and I'm like, how they're just collecting money, and they're just they're getting people into a system that has almost no security behind it. Even when people have their like note on their account, like lock my account, do not let anybody swap my account unless you like, without some sort of additional precautions. Yet this is still happening regularly. When people don't even realize what happens, you think you lose network service. But what's really happening on the back end, which I think is fascinating, is that there's been several ways that this has happened. Originally, it was starting out with inside employees being paid off to port the numbers over. So they would find a weak link inside the company. They would pay them to port over people who knew that had a lot of crypto and were on that service. They pay him like 50 grand. Here's $50,000. Port this guy's number, and it'll be fixed in a day. You don't have to worry about it. But in the meantime, once they have your phone, right? The vulnerability is, anybody who's had a phone and bought a new phone knows that like you don't have to do much now, and all your apps are recreated and everything's right there. All your contacts, everything. Most people don't have password protections on their email, on their phone. Your phone's password protected. But if someone recreates your phone on another device, they have everything. All the 2FA messages go to that phone. So when you ask for a 2FA text message, boom, it goes to that phone. The email goes to that phone. It's like if you have to relog into that email, you can reset your password, and it all goes to places now that scammer controls, right? So they go into your Coinbase account. They change the 2FA, they log in, they do this, they do that, boom, and then they sell everything and all of your other assets. They sell them into ETH or Bitcoin, and then they remove all of it from the platform and send it out before you can even tell what's happening. You've been locked out of your account. You can't log in because they've logged in, right? And so it becomes this like panic moment for people. One, now you can't even call anybody because your phone doesn't work anymore, right? So you have no network. You have no idea what's going on. And now you're getting like messages, like if you're on your computer, you're getting messages that your Coinbase account has just been logged into, right? Now you're like really freaking out. And so these companies they just don't seem to care. The telecom providers just don't seem to care that people are getting swindled and duped. Such to the point that they are they're literally just having slush funds that they're paying people off, right? Because they're waiting for class action lawsuits to come around. There's no precedents. People are probably not likely going to get their money, right? And right now, phones are your identity, right? Like if you lose your phone, like people freak out, right? And like if you lose, you can't get another phone. It takes 3 days. It's like you've been like the world has left you behind. And if you use your phone for work, right? Like who knows like what they're going to get access to. It has become such the access through a phone has become so much tied to your identity that this is becoming more of an identity theft than just a financial hack, because then they have access to everything. They just go after your crypto first because it's easiest, but they can get into your bank account. They basically are you. So the SIM swap victims are the ones that I really feel bad for, because a lot of times they were unknowing targets. A lot of times they'll be victimized and have no clue. And then since then, the style of the scam has changed from how they go about unlocking those numbers or porting those numbers over to the new provider. Essentially, they'll run into the store, like an actual T-Mobile store, and they will wait for a manager who's working on the iPad, and they will smash and grab. So they just run up to him, knock him over, take his iPad and run out of the mall or wherever, out of the store. And then they have an auction set up. And they're unlocking all of these numbers of targets that they have. And then these accounts basically go up for sale. and it's like, it's all timed. It's like, man, if these people put half the energy that they put into running scams into something productive, how awesome would the world be? You know? So these scammers are very, ingenuitive. Um, they're using a lot of like precise marketing techniques. They're using a lot of traditional business related like activities. They're running these things like an actual business, and it's sad that they'd rather spend their time doing that.
Yeah, that's too bad for all the victims out there, and that is just eye-opening. I had no idea that of the magnitude of what's happening with these the sim swaps happening is just crazy. Do you have any advice, like how can we safeguard ourselves to this, not, or trying to prevent it from happening?
So there is a service, like if you have a lot of crypto, or even if you have enough that if you lost it, it would affect you dramatically. There's a service I'm not trying to plug, but it's called EFANI, EFANI, and they're actually used by a lot of movie stars, high profile athletes, because they have entourages. People have access to their phones, their wealth, like if all kinds of stuff. And so it's an additional way to like sim lock your line, and you don't have to worry about them porting it. So it's I think it's like $100 a month. So it's more expensive, but it's a service that you can guarantee that will provide you that peace of mind. And if it's only a little bit extra per month, then you're already paying, and you get unlimited everything. So it's I think it's a top Verizon type plan. But yeah, that's probably one of the best things you can do right now to protect yourself, and stay away from T-Mobile in general or any of their affiliates, because they have all of the companies that are the worst.
All right, that is good to know. Stay away from T-Mobile and sim lock your phone. So yes, great advice. I noticed a few things in your background there that, some are catching my eye. Do you have a story about one of the items in your background you want to tell us?
Which item in my background are you looking at
So the
in
two
particular?
books over your shoulders here. Um,
Oh,
Tell us about one of those.
um, so this little seating area that I'm at right now is my wife put this together. So this is like her little ode to the like, I don't know, this is the thing she likes right now. So this is about Mexico City, which is a place that we're planning to visit, and then Joshua Tree, which is a place that we've visited a couple of times and really enjoy. So it's just one of those. I think these books will rotate, and so will the art also behind me. But it's yeah, it's her entryway piece.
Well, I love it. That's why I had to ask about it. And it's better that like you're sitting between somewhere you've been and somewhere you're going, and it's you in the middle. It's like very aesthetically pleasing. It's colorful and it has a story. I'm really glad I asked. So great job to your wife.
Yeah, this is not what my office looks like.
I know people are like, all right, this is some guy in his basement, obviously with the light, but yours is much more aesthetically pleasing for sure. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I think, what you do is fascinating, and I appreciate you giving us advice on how we can safeguard ourselves through our digital identity, which is our cell phone, which, is an important thing. But how can we like support you in your mission, and what is your web address, and how can we follow you?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so you can always visit us at coinstructive.com. And the mission really that I've tried to establish is one of transparency, trust, and optimism. Because even when things look really dark and bleak, which we all experience this at some point in our life. So I'm talking really from the scam side of things, right? It's important that we empathize with the victims, because this is not just a financial crime. And I want everybody to know that, like, to me, helping victims is not just about helping them get their money back. It's about helping you put your life back together. Because if you've ever talked to somebody who's been a victim, excuse me, of a financial crime, it affects their sleep. It affects their relationships. It affects every aspect of their life, right? You think about it, you can't go to work correctly and focus. Like, people think about suicide or actually do commit suicide. It's devastating, and it affects everything in your life. And so we really just want to make sure that you have a trustworthy companion on your side to give you advice on how you can help yourself, because there's a lot of recovery scams, which we didn't even talk about, right? But unfortunately, what we see more often than not is that if you've been a victim once, you're on the list to be a victim again. And so the scammers pass you to another set of scammers, and they try to help you get your money back, and they just milk more out of you. And so by the time I get to those victims, they don't trust anybody, right? And so the important thing is, do your due diligence. If it sounds too good to be true, or someone's promising returns that are sounding astronomically good, think twice, right? And also, if you meet somebody through like a dating app or something like that, just be very cautious, because it starts out very nonchalant, and they just are like, oh, you should just check this out. I made money doing it. You might be able to too. That's usually how they get you. They build your trust, right? It's a confidence scam. They're con men, right? That's what the whole point is. They build your trust so that they think that you'll do what they tell you to do. It's easier to just follow someone's lead that you trust, because we're all super busy. So, and if you're ever in a moment where this is the last thing I'll leave you with. If you're ever in a moment in your life where you feel like there's so much going on around me, or you have some big stressor in your life and some critical aspect of something that's happened, family, friends, work, then you're just like, all right, I can't really focus. Don't make any big moves. Don't make any financial moves, big purchases. Don't move money. Don't send crypto. Don't help anybody out until you know you have the time to evaluate the situation. Because more often than not, that's when I wasn't thinking clearly. I had this thing that was distracting me with my child is in the hospital, my mother is dying, like all of these things. And then that's when they get you, is when you're distracted. So if you're distracted, take a second, think about it, and then go ahead and move forward. And if you need somebody to help evaluate it beforehand, we do that too. You don't have to wait to call us until after the fact.
Yes, that is such a great way to end, Chris. I appreciate your words so much, and your wisdom and the advice for all of us to not get scammed. So thank you again so much for your time.
Thanks, LeDrop WithCheese. Love being your show.